Good afternoon, everyone. As we open our forum, we would like to remind the audience to follow these house rules to provide a safe and productive forum for all. Follow the naming format affiliation name, example UPDEPP 1. Upon entering, kindly ensure your mic is muted unless granted permission to speak. Feel free to turn on your camera and you may use the provided Zoom background available in the Zoom chat.
We encourage active participation. Please use the chat box to share your responses and reactions. For any technical issues, you may reach out to members with OC in their Zoom name. At the end of the event, stay tuned for the feedback form to share your comments and suggestions. We encourage everyone to strictly follow these guidelines all throughout the program.
Before proceeding, we would like to acknowledge our partners who have shown interest in organizing Kalikasan at Komunidad, a Bangkulálâ S&T policy forum, in collaboration with UPDEPP Cultural Committee, co-presented by International Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation, UP Association of Economic Students, SALINLAHI, CvSU Environmental Science Student Association.
In partnership with UP Geology Major Society, CS Wizards, special thanks to Youth Advocates for Climate Action Philippines, Bantayog ng Mga Bayani Foundation, and Philippine Association of Geology Students, SEG Student Chapter.
Again, thank you for joining and partnering with us for Kalikasan at Komunidad, a forum on the impact of Chico River Dam Project. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Kalikasan at Komunidad, a forum on the impact of Chico River Dam Project. We are glad to have you all in our discussion. I am Carissa Fernando, and I'll be one of your hosts for this forum.
And I am Lori Alisa Emariano, your co-host for this online forum.
To formally commence our event, we would like to call on our project head, Lori Mariano, to share her opening remarks. Let's give her a round of applause.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's a great honor to welcome each of you to Kalikasan at Komunidad, a forum on the impact of the Chico River Dam Project. This gathering represents more than just an event. It's a platform for dialogue, learning, and collaboration around one of the most pressing environmental and community issues today. We're here not only to explore the policy implications of development projects, but to deeply consider their impact on the indigenous communities, their rights, and the natural ecosystems they cherish and protect. Our forum is made possible through the generous support and collaboration of multiple organizations and individuals committed to advocacy, cultural preservation, and environmental stewardship. Thank you to all our partner organizations for your dedication and to our speakers who bring invaluable perspectives shaped by their lived experiences, expertise, and relentless pursuit of justice and sustainability. As we proceed, I encourage everyone to remain open, engaged, and respectful. Let's make this space one for honest reflection, critical discussion, and above all, a commitment to the future of both communities and our environment. Thank you once again for being here. Together, may we continue building a future where development and respect for our environment go hand in hand.
Thank you so much, Lori, for the warm welcome and introduction to Kalikasan at Komunidad. For today's event, we will be witnessing two presentations from an activist with the people and power behind the protest and an energy policy expert with energy policy implications of Chico River Dam projects. From these two perspectives, we hope to gain insights and suggestions on the Chico River Dam project and synergize these ideas to direct the future plans of policymakers and the government.
Today, we are joined by esteemed speakers who will impart their insights on the Chico River Dam project. Through their understanding of this policy, we hope to gather and determine suggestions and future directions for the project. For our first session, we will be discussing the people and power behind the protest. Our first speaker, Ms. Joanna Patricia Kintanar Cariño, is an indigenous Ibaloy woman directly descended from the pioneering Ibaloy Igorot family of Mateo and Bayosa Cariño of Cafaguay before it became the present Baguio City. She was educated at the public school system of Baguio Central School, Baguio City High School, and the University of the Philippines Baguio, where she excelled academically.
Ms. Cariño has been a human rights activist her whole life, specifically in the field of indigenous people's rights. She was already a student activist before the martial law and is a survivor of the Marcos dictatorship, having been illegally arrested and detained for 2 years during the martial law period. Ms. Joanna was among the founders of the Cordillera People's Alliance in 1984 and currently sits on its advisory council. She chairs SELDA, Northern Luzon, the Organization of Ex-Political Prisoners. She is also co-chair of Sandugo, the movement of Moro and indigenous peoples for self-determination. She is among the conveners of CARMMA for the campaign against the return of the Marcoses and martial law.
For her advocacy and passion, Ms. Joanna was awarded the 2019 Gwangju Prize for Human Rights, the first Filipino to receive this prestigious international award. Let's give a warm virtual round of applause to Ms. Joanna Patricia Kintanar Cariño.
Thank you. And I would like to greet all of our participants a pleasant day and a good afternoon. Please allow me to share my screen. Mm, just a while. Um, just, is my
Ma'am, I think your screen bar is not yet visible, but you can share screen to us, I guess.
but I changed kasi some of the slides. That's why just give me a little while, no?
Okay, then.
Mm. Um, let's just try. Um, oh God's technological difficulties. Doesn't my screen come out? And we're wasting. And we just share the, let's just use your.
Okay po, ma'am. We will notify the members.
I can now, I think. Am I screen sharing?
Yes po.
Okay. I'm sorry for the okay. Good afternoon to all of us. Um, I didn't know that there was an UP Diliman extension program in Pampanga. So this is the first time I know about this. And I am glad that you are interested in learning about the Chico River Dam Project. This was quite some time ago. We can update because, of course, it continues to be relevant. No, the lessons that were learned from this Chico River Basin Dam project continues to be relevant today. So I hope that all of us can learn something and that we can have a good discussion. So the Chico River is the largest river system in the Cordillera, no? From its headwaters in Mount Data, Mountain Province, it traverses the whole mountain province, connecting to Kalinga, the next province, and then ultimately joining the Cagayan River in the Cagayan Valley. So this is the largest river system in the Cordillera. And rivers and river systems are actually very important for indigenous communities because, of course, this is where the water is, the land is fertile, and therefore you really have a lot of indigenous communities along the river systems, such as the Chico. When martial law was declared in 1972, there was an oil energy crisis then, no? Oil prices internationally was shooting up. And therefore, the Marcos dictatorship looked for energy projects. And this was one of their flashpoint projects, the Chico River Basin Development Project, where they were going to build 4 mega dams, in other words, huge dams along the stretch of the Chico River. 2 dams in the mountain province, in Sabangan and Annabel, and then lower down 2 dams in Kalinga, in Basaw and Tomyangan. So this was the whole development project. And at that time, this was a feasibility study, you know what I am showing you, from a German firm which was contracted by the Marcos dictatorship. So Chico 2, 3, and 4 were deemed economically feasible. And therefore, that was the prioritization then. Chico 2 first, then 3, then 4, then 1 later. And it was intended for multi-purpose development, hydropower, and irrigation. And then Chico 2, which was the Annabel Tukukan Dam, was given top priority and projected for completion by 1978. And then, but all of these other areas were to be surveyed, no? But this was a feasibility study, more of an economic feasibility study. And therefore, there was the recommendation that aside from that, there should also be a social feasibility study to look at the social costs of such a project. And therefore, in 1974, after this feasibility study was accomplished, the National Power Corporation already sent their survey teams to Chico 2, 3, and 4. Now, these are the communities along the Chico River. In fact, this was made into a song, but I don't have a good voice. I should sing it for you. But they used to sing this because these were the communities. So there are so many communities that united actually against the construction of the dam. So they used to sing this in the Peace Pact conferences or in the Bodong conferences that were being held, no? So these were Sabangan, Bontoc, Tukukan, Annabel, and Betuagan. Those were in Mountain Province, and then the rest of these other communities were in Kalinga. Now, the project area was the total catchment area of the Chico River, from its headwaters at Mount Data down to Dam 4 in Tumyangan, which was a total of 1,400 square kilometers. And the watershed would include the municipalities of Sabangan, Sagada, Bontoc, Sadanga, Bauco, Barlig in Mountain Province, and the municipalities of Tinglayan, Lubuag, and Pasil, and parts of Tabuk in Kalinga, which would negatively impact on an estimated 100,000 people. And what would the impacts be? Villages were to be submerged, and of course, this would mean the loss of traditional livelihoods, the rice terraces, the uma or the Swedens, the orchards, and the forests. And the project and the catchment area actually, particularly nga along the rivers, because as already stated, there were so many communities along the river. These were composed basically of ancestral territories of tribes, no? There is this term here, ili. And the ili is land and people. It is not only land. So when you identify with your ili, this is your land, but that's also your name as a people. And therefore, the loss of ancestral land would mean the loss of their distinct identities as tribal peoples, no? If they were to be displaced from these ancestral lands. And also, the belief system is that the living are the guardians of this legacy, which has been, the area is very rugged, mountainous terrain. And therefore, to develop this, it really took generations and much work, no, to build the rice terraces, to develop settled communities in this very difficult terrain and environment. And therefore, it is the responsibility of the living to guard this legacy and to steward and nurture for future generations. And also the burial grounds of the ancestors who came before, who developed this ili, no? The living have the duty to protect and defend. And therefore, when the National Power Corporation came to these communities to do their survey work in 1974, they were actually bodily prevented, no, from entering the communities. Armed villagers, because these are warrior societies, basically. The tribal communities in the Cordillera are also warrior societies because the indigenous socio-political system is the Peace Pact. But the other side of the Peace Pact is tribal war. And therefore, these communities are actually warrior societies. So the surveyors were met by armed villagers or disrobed women and forced the surveyors and teams to a hasty retreat. The people also tried to send various delegations to Malacanang to meet with the dictator. However, these were dismissed as sentimental, no? Or else they were given the runaround and they were unable to meet with the dictator, President Marcos. They sent in numerous petitions. And when the National Power Corporation and the military would try to call community meetings, all of the people were very vocal and articulate about their opposition to the dam project. And academics from UP Diliman, no, like the anthropologist Mariflor Parpan, who was then doing her, was it her PhD study or master's study in a community to be affected by the dam, Tanglag, she also wrote on this, no? And then Bishop Francisco Claver, because he is Bontoc, his community would be affected, no? But he was in Mindanao at this time, no? So there was already growing interest in this from academics, from the church, aside from the opposition of the people. There were letters Bishop Claver wrote to President Marcos. And in May of 1975, there was this Botchong conference, no? Botchong or Budong, that's the term for peace pact. That's the term for peace pact. So there was this peace pact conference attended by 150 Bontoc and Kalinga. And the results of this peace pact conference were submitted to Marcos and really, and a letter was sent to the World Bank because the dams were to be funded by the World Bank. And because of all of this, in June of 1975, Executive Secretary Alejandro Melchor announced the temporary suspension of the dams. This is the PAGTA. PAGTA is the agreement. This is the agreement that was reached, no, in the first Botchong conference, the Peace Pact conference. And if you will read through this PAGTA, it really says that the people, the indigenous people, should not cooperate at all with this project on threat of death even, no? So that is the wording of this PAGTA, which was signed by 150 Bontoc and Kalinga elders. And so after there was announcement of suspension of Chico 2, the priority shifted to Chico 4, no? So from Mountain Province to Kalinga. And the Presidential Assistant on National Minorities, Manuel Elizalde, arrived in Kalinga and used bribery, deception, and force to minimize the ongoing opposition to Chico 4. And in fact, he armed one group against another. He co-opted certain tribal elders, although the majority were still in opposition to the dam project. And in fact, he even brought a Kalinga delegation to Malacanang. No? He chose people and brought them to Malacanang, and then later on, they announced that these people said that they were already in favor of the dams. But actually, they were just made to sign, and later on, it was announced that they were against the dams. So when they went back to the communities, the people asked them to retract those signatures. And then Catholic Bishop Prosser said that the National Power Corporation and the Panamin had really, really low credibility with the people. So to convince the people about the dams, Dam 4 was the priority then in Tomyangan. They set up the Kalinga Special Development Region and the Kalinga Interagency Commission, no, to implement a resettlement program. They bought a lot for resettlement. They started construction. But notwithstanding, all of this relocation offer was still unacceptable to the people. And in fact, the Kalingas were becoming more and more bold in their opposition. They repeatedly tore down the work camps which the NPC tried to put up in Tomyangan. And the fourth time that the Kalingas tore down the work camps, 250 Kalinga men, women, and children carried back the materials from Tomyangan, the dam site, to the Philippine Constabulary camp at Bulanao, Tabuk, in a silent protest march of 28 kilometers, which lasted through the night and through the curfew hours. Now, remember that this was 1976. this was the early years of martial law. There was really military rule, no? In fact, you couldn't even gather. No meetings were allowed. But you look, no, at these tribal peoples resorting to their tradition, no, of total defense, men, women, and children. No? They brought this. They tore down the camps and brought the materials to Tapu. In October 1976, there was a referendum to ask the people whether martial law should continue. There was almost a total boycott of the national referendum in the dam-affected areas, and therefore there were a series of arrests of some 150 people, papangat or tribal elders, married couples, elderly women, youth. They were detained at the Philippine Constabulary Stockade in Bulanao, Tabuk. They were charged with obstruction of the October referendum, hampering government projects, illegal possession of firearms, subversion. And later on, since there were so many, some of them were brought to Camp Olivas in Pampanga. I was then a political prisoner in Camp Olivas, Pampanga. And this is the first time I heard about the Chico River Development Project, because suddenly one day in the camp, there were so many Igorots, some of them only in G-strings, who had suddenly arrived because you don't have any news. And that's the first time we heard about this dam project. The late Senators Jokno and Tanyada of Free Legal Assistance Group offered their free legal assistance. They were detained from 4 to 8 months, and during this time, farms were left untended, homes and children neglected, there was food scarcity. And during this time that they were imprisoned, the National Power Corporation took advantage of the situation to construct their work camps. But violence was already escalating. The work camp was again attacked. And this time, the NPC employees were already killed and serious wounding of others. So such that they made no man's land, 500-meter radius from the work camps was declared no man's land and a free fire zone. Any animals and humans here were fair game. No? So they were really trying to push through with the project, and the people were really in total opposition to the project. In December 1978, another Peace Pact conference was held in Bugnay. I was already released from prison then, and I was privileged to be able to attend this Budong conference in Bugnay. And this was attended by so many Peace Pact holders and Kapampangan tribal leaders, and they reaffirmed their opposition to the dams. They were consolidating through the traditional institution of the Peace Pact, no? And then shortly thereafter, after that December 1978 Peace Pact Conference, the National Power Corporation brought a busload of Kalinga leaders. They brought them to the Binga and Ambuklao dams here in Benguet because they wanted to show them, oh, but this is just what will happen and it will be good for the people, etc. But there was an impasse, no point of agreement, no? Because the tribal leaders, the Papangat, insisted that they did not want the dams, with the NPC insisting that the dams had to be built because this was a flashpoint project of the dictatorship. One of the very vocal oppositors to the dam was Makliing Dulag. And in this dialogue, he said, "Such arrogance to speak of owning the land. How can you own that which will outlive you?" And if you will look at this slide, by that time, there were increasing numerous human rights violations, no? And in fact, this thing which was submitted to the president lists actually more than 1,000 human rights violations that had already occurred there by 1978. But also, in 1976, as early as 1976, there were reports that the New People's Army had already expanded into the Chico Dam area. And in fact, there were already many recruits from the dam-affected communities, and there were reports of increasing armed encounters, no? And numerous reports of human rights violations committed by the military. And on April 24 of 1980, in the dead of the night, a platoon of military entered Bugnay in Tinglayan, and they shot through the doors of the house of Makliing Dulag, and he was killed. No? And they also shot through the doors of the house of another leader, Pedro Dumur, and he was wounded. So fortunately, he wasn't killed. And in fact, one of the quotes from Makliing was, "I say to you, the question of the dams is more than political. The question is life, our Kalinga life. Apo Kabunyan, the Lord of us all, gave us this land. It is sacred, nourished by our sweat. It shall become even more sacred when it is nourished by our blood." And so he was martyred. He gave up his life, no, in the opposition against the Chico dams. And these are slides from outside his house and the community, no, the Bugnay Butbut community after the day after his assassination by the military. And then 2 months after his assassination, in June of 1980, there was an international fact-finding mission that went to investigate his death. So they traveled. This was led by the former senators, Jokno and Tanyada. And they had to cross this very long hanging bridge. There was no bridge to go to the community, Luplupa in Tinglayan. And then to show their solidarity with the tribal leaders, they took off their shirts, you will notice. They took off their shirts and then linked arms with the tribal leaders who had met them after they had crossed the long hanging bridge. And the result of the fact-finding mission was that Makliing Dulag was assassinated by the military of the dictator Marcos for his opposition to the dams. Of course, they tried to silence the opposition. That was why they tried to kill Makliing and Pedro Dungok. However, the assassination only led to greater resistance. And in fact, in this news story from that period, which came out in the then magazine Who, it's entitled Color the Chico Red, because it said nga that actually the NPA was already expanding very fast. And so many of the tribal warriors had already thrown in their lot with the New People's Army. Now, on that day, April 24, which was the assassination of Makliing, in 1981, 1982, 1983, and 1984, April 24 was commemorated as Makliing Memorial. In other words, big gatherings were called to commemorate his martyrdom and to continue to build the resistance against the Chico dams. These were hosted by communities along the Chico River. And then in 1983, in Buscalan, Tinglayan, the Kalinga Bontoc Peace Pact Holders Association was organized. Now, the Peace Pact is a traditional institution in many areas that would be affected by the Chico River. And the indigenous communities had resort to the Budong or the Peace Pact. They were building the resistance by expanding the Peace Pact. The traditional Peace Pact is just a bilateral agreement between two tribal communities. In the resistance to the Chico dams, this transformed into a multilateral Peace Pact where they would involve Peace Pact holders from so many communities because they were trying to build the very wide resistance against the Chico dams. So this one, no, in 1983 was organized the Kalinga Bontoc Peace Pact Holders Association. And these tribal elders or papangat would go to the different communities and they were exhorting the people to consolidate against to consolidate the resistance against the dams. So these are slides taken from that period, no? So you will see it involved whole communities, the feeding, the cultural presentations, very many people, no, were involved, whole communities. And then in 1985, the Kalinga Bontoc Peace Pact Holders Association transformed into the Cordillera Budong Association or CBA because in the other side of the mountains, if there was a popular resistance against the Chico dams happening here, on the other side of the mountains in Abra province in the Cordillera, there was a similar popular resistance being waged against the Cellufield Resources Corporation. Marcos had awarded 200,000 hectares of tribal forest to his crony Herminio Dicini, no, for a logging and paper pulp concession. So to include now the Peace Pact holders from Kalinga who were against the Cellufield Resources Corporation, the KBPPH8 expanded to Abra and therefore renamed itself the Cordillera Budong Association in 1985. But before this, in 1984, our alliance, the Cordillera People's Alliance, was founded in Bontoc Mountain Province through a Cordillera People's Congress for the defense of the ancestral domain and for self-determination. So, just to set this in historical context, by this time, the anti-dictatorship struggle was already gaining ground, no? Bumilis pa ito nung Ninoy Aquino was killed in the tarmac. So, marami ng human rights organizations were being set up. And even in the Cordillera, the popular resistance also involved, aside from the Peace Pact Holders Associations, setting up of many types of organizations fighting for indigenous people's rights. Student organizations, farmers organizations, professional organizations. And all of this came together in a Cordillera People's Congress that was convened in Bontoc Mountain Province in 1984, where we organized the Cordillera People's Alliance for the Defense of Ancestral Domain and for Self-Determination. So on the left, that is our founding chairperson, Attorney William Claver. He is from Bontoc. And on the right, that's our founding Secretary General, Padre Eduardo Solang. He is an Anglican priest from Sagada. So I was part of the executive committee, of the Cordillera People's Alliance when we organized in 1984. And then in 1985, the Macleing Memorial transformed into Cordillera Day, no? So yung April 24 was celebrated as or commemorated as Macleing Memorial from 1981 to 1984, and then in 1985 for the first time, this was now transformed into Cordillera Day. It was originally hosted by Balwang and Sadanga with the Cordillera Budong Association and the Cordillera People's Alliance, which had already organized. And since that time, the Cordillera Day has been hosted by local communities and people's organizations throughout the region, often with the support also of local LGUs. And then in 1986, the whole anti-dictatorship struggle came to a head, no? A critical mass had already formed, and therefore, this critical mass was able to oust the Marcos dictatorship. So if you will look at this icon, Macleing Dulag, no, is among the faces of that Justice for Ninoy, Justice for All, victims of political repression and military terrorism. So the first face there on the left is that of Macleing Dulag. And therefore, what are the lessons or the insights that we learn from this popular resistance against the construction of the Chico dams. The heroic Chico and cellulophile struggles inspired the growth of a popular resistance and a militant mass movement in the Cordillera. So it also inspired the formation of the Pispac Holders Association and the Cordillera People's Alliance. Tribal elders, the local terms are Pampanga, also Manakam, were a significant force in this resistance against development aggression, dams, logging. They led their tribes and inspired the indigenous peoples with their integrity, bravery, and steadfastness in the struggle. Indigenous political institutions were adapted to the challenges of bigger threats and new realities. Budong conferences and the development of the multilateral Budong were a major form of resistance and struggle in defense of life, land, honor, and self-determination. These Manakum, or indigenous tribal leaders, had indigenous wisdom and were the bearers of traditional knowledge. They were indigenous farmers, hunters, healers, warriors, mediators, and traditional leaders in their own communities, earning their leadership through their own merit. They were daring, industrious, fair, just, and uncompromising. If you had reached high school or had gone to work in the mines for a time, their knowledge, skills, and wisdom were used in the service of their people. They became well-respected indigenous leaders beyond their own communities at the provincial and regional levels and were recognized nationally and even internationally. The anti-Chico Dam struggle was waged in uncompromising defense of ancestral land and the right to self-determination, or the right of indigenous communities to freely determine their continued existence as distinct peoples, and the right to freely determine their political status and their economic, political, and socio-cultural development at a pace which they themselves define. In the mid-70s, protest actions were still barely happening in the cities after the wave of repression and terror unleashed by the U.S. Marcos dictatorship with the declaration of martial rule. Yet, here were these marginalized and unlettered tribal peoples who dared to struggle against all of the instrumentalities of the fascist state and who dared to win, providing proof that unwavering persistence in a just struggle will bear fruit. So these different communities, indigenous communities, and even for city-based Igorot professionals like myself, suddenly became introspective, considering all of these things which were happening in our region. So numerous activists and mass leaders emerged espousing indigenous people's rights, as we were challenged into the recognition of the pressing need for a greater unity among ourselves if we hope to succeed in the defense of our collective human rights as indigenous peoples. And this increased introspection and self-awareness among the indigenous peoples of the Cordillera paved the way towards a pan-Cordillera movement for the defense of ancestral land and self-determination. It marked the shift from spontaneous reaction to conscious and concerted unified action. As the different Igorot tribes and sectors were increasingly exposed to each other in mass meetings, intertribal activities, and Bodong conferences, there was the opportunity for dialogue and mutual sharing and learning. Here, the different Cordillera tribes and ethno-linguistic groups realized that we shared a common history of national oppression, a common geography and territory, the Cordillera Mountain Range, a common persistence of indigenous cultures, albeit in varying degrees, common problems, and common enemies. And this is also the period when the slogan, Kaigorotan, Lumaban, or coming together as Igorots, Kaigorotan, Lumaban, fight for your rights. The heroic Chico and Celluphil struggle served to inspire and motivate many people, both here and abroad, which made it possible to generate broad national and international support to sustain the popular resistance. There was broad solidarity and advocacy for the popular resistance in the region from academics, environmentalists, church groups, the mass media, NGOs, and a wide array of solidarity organizations. The Free Legal Assistance Group of the late Senators Jokno and Tañada offered free legal assistance. Anthropologists and academics wrote numerous treatises on Chico and Celluphil, and progressive media practitioners provided good press coverage. And there was the realization that the problems of tribal peoples and indigenous communities are much more complicated than in any earlier time in the past. No? So more concretely, Chico and Celluphil showed the indigenous peoples of the Cordillera that their problems cannot be taken in isolation from the wider Philippine realities. This was martial law, and this was a flagship project of martial law, and the incursions of imperialist globalization, and the project was to be funded by the World Bank. So the common view of indigenous communities as traditionally conservative and resistant to change was proven wrong, as the Kalinga and Bontoc united with as broad an alliance as possible in defense of indigenous people's rights and against the fascist dictatorship. Although the Chico resistance at the start was a spontaneous tribal response to outside threat, it soon firmly positioned itself within the mainstream of the national democratic struggle. And in February 1986, the Marcos dictatorship was ousted and Corazon Aquino assumed the presidency. The whole world recognized that people power had ousted the dictator Marcos, but not very many know that it was indigenous people's power that had effectively stopped the World Bank-funded Chico Dam Project dead in its tracks through the Kalinga and Bontoc reaffirmation of the indigenous people's tribal practice of futad, total community mobilization in defense of indigenous life, ancestral land, and self-determination. And as an afterword, just to bring it forward, of course, there are similarities in the context then and now. There was the problem of oil then, continuing problem of high-priced oil now. Although, of course, the issue with fossil fuels is much more complicated, and then the whole issue of climate change. But energy crisis then and now with the added factor of climate change. The dictator Marcos Sr. then, with his martial law, the Marcos Jr. now, there may not be martial law officially, but there is the Anti-Terror Act and other repressive laws such as the Anti-Terrorist Financing Act of 2012 and PFLCA, Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, which is red tagging and terrorist labeling all kinds of dissent, even of civilian activists like ourselves. Development aggression then and destructive projects continue to be brought into IP territories. Right now, there is again a very big dam project projected for Apayao, a series again of large dams to be built in Apayao. That's the northernmost province of the Cordillera, after Kalinga. The Ganod dams, and of course there is opposition to this, although presently not at the scale of the opposition that was brought against the Chico dams. And therefore, IP communities and organizations continue to resist all of these development aggression projects. But unfortunately, such resistance continue to be labeled as anti-development and terrorists. And just as an afterword also to the Chico dams, in I'm not sure now what year, the Chico River irrigation, there was a dam, no, built in Tabuk, but it was not a mega dam na hydropower. It's the Chico River irrigation project, a China project during the period of Duterte's presidency. Part of his, I think, the first part of his build project. So at the start, because of the experience with the Chico dams, parang indigenous communities in the Cordillera are actually allergic to dams, no? But this was an irrigation dam project. But the problem with that dam project is the irrigation would benefit Cagayan, the Cagayan province lower down the Chico River instead of Kalinga, which also needs irrigation project. So, but that is a different dam, no, from this the mega dams, 4 mega dams, which were projected to be built in the Chico River in the 1970s to the 80s, but which the Kaigurutan in the Cordillera was able to stop. And therefore, with the great similarities in context then and now, and continuing development aggression being brought into indigenous people's territories, indigenous communities and organizations continue to resist, continue to defend ancestral land, life, and honor, and therefore the struggle continues. And we live out the legacy of our heroes. These are the heroes of the Chico Dam struggle, and this is the monument which the Cordillera People's Alliance set up, no, in Bugnay, Kalinga. That is Makli Indulag, Pedro Dugo, and Ama. My goodness, I forgot the name. And we live out the legacy of our heroes. We defend. We continue to defend land, life, and honor. Much of the references for this, because this was my undergrad thesis, no, and it has also come out actually in UGAT, the Anthropological Association of the Philippines. So much of the reference for this are papers which I had already written. So that is my presentation. I hope that you learned something from it, and thank you for this opportunity to share the Chico Dam story with you. Magandang hapon sa ating lahat.
Thank you so much po, Ms. Cariño, for sharing your advocacy and knowledge on the Chico River Dam Project policy. It is our honor to have you as our speaker on the local and indigenous communities' perspective portion.
Again, we're extending our appreciation to Ms. Cariño for accepting our invitation and powering through this issue on the Cordilleras and its people.
Moving forward, we will be opening our Q&A for Ms. Cariño's session. Please keep your questions as concise as possible because we only have 10 minutes for the Q&A. We will limit the questions, and you may send your questions on the chat box. So we will now start answering the questions sent in advance.
As you can see here in the Zoom, Attorney Balite is raising his hands. You may open your mic, Sir Attorney Balite.
Hi, ma'am. Ma'am, are you related to Mateo Cariño?
Mateo Cariño is my great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather.
Yes.
Okay. Are you going to stay during my talk?
Yes, of course. I will stay during.
Okay, that's great.
I would like to hear what you have to say.
I didn't expect that you're related. I'll include a part about your great grandfather. It's such a privilege that you're related to Mateo Cariño. Thank you very much.
Yes, and of course, the more so that I will stay for your talk because now you're going to speak about my great grandfather.
The students should learn about your great grandfather.
Yes, of course,
Your great grandfather shaped our law. So thank you.
Thank you.
Another question po from Mix Maddie Sabio. There's an interesting parallel between the Chico River and the Kaliwa River Dam po. both being energy projects meant to serve the mainstream market at the cost of the rights of indigenous peoples. Since energy is going to be a continuing need for the mainstream, what do you think we, the nation, have learned about discussing the differing energy needs of stakeholders?
Yes, this is true. Indigenous people's resistance against destructive dams is not only the Chico, no, and presently the Ganed dams. It's also against the Kaliwa dams, in Panay against the Halaur dams. Now, of course, the government rhetoric says that these dams are needed because of the energy crisis. And now they even relate it to renewable energy. But actually, large dams, are, mega dams, no, are really not all that sustainable, as shown by our experience with Ambuklao and Binga dams here in Benguet. But also, the problem nga is that this will displace indigenous peoples. Now, when we look at the biggest users of energy, these are actually big corporations, no, industry, many of which are not even owned by Filipinos, no. And therefore, in terms of when we say the need for energy, the high level of need for energy, I think there is an issue also of what type of development is the Philippine government following. And the type of development, because this is the dominant development framework, basically, is neoliberal development, no? Neoliberal capitalist development. But basically, when you look at this, I mean, this is basically for the benefit of the largest corporations in the whole world. And this is basically for profit of a few over the rights and welfare of the many. This is the type of development that is being followed and where even the framework for energy needs is located. And therefore, when indigenous peoples fight against destructive mega dams, it is not because we are anti-development, no, but it is because we are against that type of development, which benefits, they will say it benefits the majority. But actually, if we look at a deeper analysis of the type of development framework guiding Philippine society, it basically benefits primarily the few oligarch local elites and their partners, the big international corporations. And therefore, we are also against this neoliberal type of development where huge mega dams, logging and mining fall into. And basically, we advocate alternative forms of development, people over profit, no? And with, of course, the respect for nature and, the needs of the many are not that simpler lifestyles and simpler needs.
Thank you po, Ms. Cariño, for addressing that question. We have another question on the chat box from one of our participants, and it says that since you continue to be an environmentalist po, would you have any insights about whether the Chico River Dam experience has changed the practice of environmental advocacy in the country, or at least the Cordillera?
The Chico Dam experience, as I told you earlier, parang made us indigenous peoples allergic to dams. Parang it's a knee-jerk reaction na dams kahit anong tipo na ng dams you're allergic to. But of course, we have to be more analytical, no, with the types of projects because these were really destructive mega dams. In terms of environmental issues are much more complicated today, di ba? Kasi you have climate change. And when you speak about climate change, again, we go back, no, to the type of development framework, which is neoliberalism and capitalism, which is the greatest source of climate change, di ba? That kind of capitalism is the greatest source of global warming and climate change. And therefore, there really has to be alternative ways. There has to be greater attention really given to the environment at this time. Kasi nga, yun nga climate crisis na talaga. And so, there has to be a greater value. And it is here where indigenous peoples really can show the way, di ba? Kasi indigenous peoples are traditionally the stewards of the environment. So, kung saan yung indigenous peoples, kasi yan ang kanilang lupa at kabuhayan, talagang, I mean, without outside destructive projects, parang indigenous peoples really steward the environment. So, I think in terms of the question, while everybody says that we should pay greater attention to the environment, iba-iba din talaga the seriousness of this. Because unless nga you change your development framework, ay talagang climate justice is hard to happen.
Okay, Prof. Rem is raising his hands.
Not a question po, pero actually, since may opportunity na rin naman, at na-mention na inyong thesis, I would like to thank you very much for the thesis. It's how I learned about the Chico River Dam in its details. I mean, I'm familiar. I was familiar before already with the story of McLean Dulag and with the struggle after that, of course. But it's through your thesis that I really learned about the technical details of the World Bank funding and the process by which the entire project was proposed. Thank you very much, po.
So this brings the end of our Q&A session for Ms. Cariño. We will be entertaining other questions in the latter part of the program, if possible, for the speakers. Thank you all for your thoughtful questions and for being so engaged with the conversation. Once more, thank you, Ms. Joanna Patricia Kintanar Cariño, for the fruitful session. We hope that your community's insights will guide more future plans for the project and the overall policymaking process of other development initiatives.
Before we move forward to the awarding of certificate for Ms. Cariño, we would like to invite you to pay close attention to the presentation by the International Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation, or IPMSDL.
This presentation is in line with the Indigenous Peoples Heroes Day, celebrated annually every November 10. Through this, the IPMSDL hopes to recognize our Chico River Dam struggle heroes and keep their voices alive.
Without further ado, let's call on Ms. Paul Belisario, Assistant Global Coordinator for IPMSDL.
Hello, everyone, and thank you. I will not take much time. I really don't have a presentation. I just send our invitation, and I would like, of course, thank you, Manang Joanna, and everyone here. For the STS students, we don't want to miss the opportunity to invite everyone because this issue of the Cordillera peoples, the struggle against Chico Dam, we owe it a lot from IPMSDL on how we really developed and started the Indigenous Peoples Heroes Day that we commemorate every November 10. And now we are commemorating it for the whole month of November. And we think this is the best way, especially for the students, for the youth, to be involved and to know more about not only Makliing Dulag, Ama Makliing Pedro Dungok, Ama Lumbayan, and of course, Ama Mateo Cariño. We have a lot of other nameless indigenous peoples heroes, not only in the Cordillera, not only in the Philippines, but around the world, who may have faced the same struggles against destructive dams, destructive mining, against militarization, against criminalizations and human rights violations. And we want everyone to join us and honor their name, because I think we owe it a lot to them of whatever we have now on the issue of climate, on the issue of environment, on the issue of what kind of development do we really need to push forward our society. So please link with IPMSDL. We are available online, and we want you to honor, remember, and amplify the stories. You know, this story of Ama Maklingas in a very colorful, very brave and vibrant stories. And we want everyone to know not only just one, but a lot of our indigenous people's heroes. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and we hope to see you also in all our events in commemorating, living the legacy, living the life. And as Manang Joanna said, the struggle continues. Therefore, we should always remember and live the fight and the legacy of our indigenous peoples here. Thank you so much again to all our students, and I'm happy to listen more to our discussion.
Thank you, Mix Paul Belisario of IPMSDL, for forwarding Indigenous communities' rights and pressing on the challenge of protecting and upholding the honor of our local heroes.
At this juncture, we express our heartfelt gratitude to Ms. Cariño for her time and contribution to this forum. It is with great pleasure that we present the Certificate of Appreciation to Ms. Joanna Patricia Kintanar Cariño for her efforts in Indigenous representation and advocacy.
Please let me take this opportunity to read the citation of the certificate. This certificate is presented to Ms. Joanna Patricia Kintanar Cariño for sharing her valuable knowledge as a guest speaker for Kalikasan at Komunidad, a forum on the impact of the Chico River Dam Project held via Zoom.
Let us give a virtual round of applause to Ms. Joanna Patricia Kintanar Cariño.
We request the logistics members to lead the picture taking with Ms. Cariño. Logistics, please take over.
Good afternoon. I'll take one shot of screenshot po. Ready po. 1, 2. Okay na po.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you po.
In the latter half of the forum, our conversation will focus on the energy policy implications of the Chico River Dam projects.
We are privileged to introduce our next speaker, Atty Paul Heherson M. Balite. He brings his expertise in law and public policy with a focus on issues that directly impact communities affected by energy and environmental initiatives.
Attorney Balite is a chief of staff for a member of the Philippine House of Representatives, and he has served in numerous roles where he contributed to policy development, especially on energy matters. He's also a member of the Philippine Institute of Arbitrators and the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators.
Currently, he's an instructor of land valuation and management at the UP Open University and technology management at UP Diliman. Today, he will guide us through the public policy implications of Chico River Dam projects. Let's give him a virtual round of applause.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. And such a pleasure to hear from Miss Cariño earlier. I prepared my slides and I gave it to the team already. So, can you kindly show it?
Yes po, we have notified the members.
Pero actually before that, just to share Kasi nga, nagulat ako na Miss Carino was here. She's related to Mateo Carino. If okay with everyone, mag-detour muna tayo from what I prepared. I have a 10-year-old presentation on Philippine land law. Tapos I'd like uh, to show a segment lang nung presentation. Can you kindly give me co-host permissions?
I think you can share na po without the co-host setting.
Can you see my slide?
Yes po.
Do you know this person? This is Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. So he's a popular person for graduates of the UP College of Law, because the UP College of Law has words in its lobby. The business of a law school is not sufficiently described when you say that it is to teach law and to make lawyers. It is to teach law in a grand manner and to make great lawyers. So those are the words of Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. He is a complicated person, because even if he wrote such words, which are emblazoned in the premier law school of the Philippines, he also made a decision, Buck versus Bell, which says that the state can sterilize persons with very low IQ. So, so, he has a wide range of decision, which may be conflicting. I'm going to narrate one decision that Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote, Cariño versus the insular government. The insular government is the government of the Philippines administered by the Americans. And Cariño is Mateo Cariño, who is the great-grandfather of Miss Joanna Cariño. So, wait. So in 1906, a decision penned by Justice Holmes reversing a decision that had gone all the way to the Philippine Supreme Court. So natalo si Cariño sa Philippine Supreme Court. The Philippine Supreme Court said na because the insular government is trying to take the property of Cariño, which is essentially almost all of Baguio City. So, so the Philippine Supreme Court didn't side with the Filipino. The Philippine Supreme Court sided with the American insular government, saying that the power of the new American government can has higher priority than the rights of Cariño, or the rights that Cariño is claiming. So the case involved the claim by a native Ibaloy, Mateo Cariño, to ownership antedating colonial times. So Cariño is saying that my right to my property is my ancestral domain. It far it far it goes farther than the claim of the Spanish king. And Oliver Wendell Holmes agreed. The province of Benguet was inhabited by a tribe that the Solicitor General in his argument characterized as a savage tribe. So the Solicitor General characterized our earlier speaker's great grandfather as a savage tribe member that never was brought under the civil or military government of the Spanish crown. So the irony here is, the Solicitor General is claiming that he is from a savage tribe, but they are facing each other in civil court. So not only up to the Philippine Supreme Court, but even to the U.S. Supreme Court. It seems probable, if not certain, that the Spanish officials would not have granted to anyone in that province the registration to which formerly the plaintiff was entitled by the Spanish laws, and which would have made uh, the, this beyond the question good. Whatever may have been the technical position of Spain, it does not follow that in the view of the United States, Cariño had lost all rights and was a mere trespasser when the present government seized his land. The argument to that effect seems to amount to a denial of native titles through an important part of the island of Luzon, at least for the want of ceremonies, which the Spaniards would not have permitted and had not the power to enforce. So, in so many words, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes in the United States Supreme Court agreed with Mateo Cariño that his right to his domain is greater than the claim of Spain and the insular government. So with that is the concept of native title with the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act of 1997. So this is another law that makes the state of the law and the state of facts very different from what Miss Carino was narrating earlier. So nag-history lesson kasi kanina eh. And ang ipe-present ko right now is not much of history but more of the present. Pero may portion rin ako ng history. So as a background lang ng we have the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, the principal author of which was do you know this, kids? Kids na kayo sa mata ko eh. Kilala niyo ba to? From the logistics team, do you know this senator? Oh, I hear silence. This is Senator Flavier. He is very popular for a millennial like me because of the campaign of the Department of Health for iodized salt. So he was also the promoter of the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act. But you know, before the law so when the law was enacted, it was questioned in the Supreme Court. And the questioner in the Supreme Court was also an eminently qualified person, si Justice Cruz. And Justice Cruz argues that the Constitution, which enshrines the Regalian Doctrine, where the state owns lands of public domain, already changed the state of the law where ancestral lands are respected. Therefore, Justice Cruz, who many people respect, said that the IPRA was unconstitutional. But on the other side was a lawyer who is now Justice of the Supreme Court, Justice Leonen, who argued that the same constitution protects the rights of indigenous cultural communities, including their ancestral domain. So there's a tension in the face of how do we read the Constitution and the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act. And eventually, it reached the Supreme Court. This is the Supreme Court in its Baguio, in Baguio. And this is how a journalist narrated the hearing. So Marvic Leonen was young, up-and-coming lawyer taking the less fashionable path for the public interest of the country's neglected peoples. He felt that it was going to be a crucial day for the oral arguments before the Supreme Court. 3 ethnic groups from the Cordillera, Mindoro, and Mindanao had each given Leonen an amulet for luck and courage, and they had for that purpose held a ritual for the gods for their common voice to be heard symbolically. He had put the tokens in his pocket and was told by the tribal elders later on that when he spoke in court, a shaft of light from the summer sun's rays had fallen on him. He considered that a good omen. So that was how a journalist narrated it. This is the Solicitor General. He argued that Cariño's doctrine applies only to alienable lands of the public domain and cannot extend to other lands of the public domain, such as forest, timber, mineral lands, and national parks. Okay. Okay. But it so happens that when the Supreme Court was hearing this case, uh, it was an even number. So 14 justices when usually there are 15. So no tiebreaker. And so the vote was 7-7. So it, in the question whether the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act violates the Constitution, the Supreme Court was a hung court. So 7 against and 7-4, which means that the petition questioning the validity of the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act was dismissed. And that's the story of the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act and how Mateo Carino and how he fought for his ancestral rights remain the law of the land up to now. So even from 1906. So that's a detour from our presentation. I hope that was a nice detour. Hindi ko nasayang yung oras ninyo. Ma'am Joanna, alam niyo ba yung mga yon? This was a presentation I made 10 years ago. So, to the logistics team, can you kindly show my presentation right now? Okay, so when I was approached, they said that I will focus on energy policy implications. So my concern here right now is I will explain further later. But unlike the history lesson that Ms. Cariño told you earlier, power generation right now is largely a private activity. It's no longer a government activity, unlike the period of the dictatorship. Next slide, please. Next, okay. So, when we talk of the energy sector, we consider firstly the oil and gas sector. So we have upstream, midstream, downstream. Upstream is essentially obtaining the fuel. Midstream is transporting the fuel. Downstream is when the fuel is consumed or down to the consumption level of consumers. Oil and gas is a convenient term. Usually, it's the fuel sector. So nuclear, radioactive fuel, hydrogen or alternative fuels can be placed here as well. Next slide, please. The electric power industry. So previously, we have a vertically integrated mammoth called the National Power Corporation. Yung sa history lesson nga ni Ma'am Joanna, yung mga staffers ng Napocor na muntik ng maitak ng mga indigenous peoples groups. So wala na vertically integrated kasi yung National Power Corporation before. So we have power generation, transmission, which is the backbone of the power industry. Yung mga malalaking poste when you go to the provinces. So that's transmission. Distribution is when it's down to the consumption level. Sa ano ba? Saan yung extension Angeles City, di ba? Meralco pa rin ba dyan? Ang distributor? Carissa, Meralco ba? Or Lori?
Actually po, we're inside Clark po. So,
So
as if
may
I'm correct po, Clark Electric Corporation.
May Clark Electric Corporation. So yun yung distributor na so yung distribution sector. And the supply sector, essentially yung na naniningil ng bills. Usually yung distributor din yung naniningil right now kasi hindi pa down to consumption level yung supply sector. Um the supply sector is contract mongers, essentially connecting the generators to the consuming public. So in more sophisticated power markets like Singapore or the United States, down to the consumption level na yan where a consumer can choose. So may kausap siyang na supplier, sabi ni supplier, enter a contract with me, ito yung price ko, mas mahal pero lahat renewables, or may isang supplier na magbebenta ng sarili niyang supply, sabihin niya, no, enter a contract with me, it's cheaper pero hindi renewables yung yung source or mga generators na meron ako. So yan yung electric power industry. Next slide please. So as an overview, we have a complex power industry. The supervisor of the industry is the Department of Energy. And with respect to the power sector, we have an independent regulator, the Energy Regulatory Commission, so that the consumers are protected because there are monopolies involved here, such as the transmission sector, which is a natural monopoly. When we say a natural monopoly, it doesn't make sense na maraming transmission lines. Kasi these are very expensive endeavors, and one will be sufficient to wheel the electricity of the generators. Similarly, it doesn't make sense na may kalaban si Clark Electric Company na marami kayong electric posts sa kalsada. So one is sufficient. So there are natural monopolies here. Since we know that monopolies can have an adverse effect because of the power that they can exert with respect to prices for consumers. A regulator steps in, and here in the power sector, it's the ERC, the Energy Regulatory Commission. Similarly, there is another regulator, the Philippine Competition Commission. Since as I explained earlier, dun sa supply sector, 'di ba? Pag may supplier na lalapit sa consumer, ako yung piliin mo. Tapos may isang supplier, hindi, ako yung piliin mo. So there's competition. To ensure that there's a fair marketplace, the Philippine Competition Commission steps in. So with respect to generation, we still see the National Power Corporation, but it's a shell of its former giant days. So the law changed in 2001, and now it's the National Power Corporation Small Power Utilities Group. So it can only own assets for missionary areas or off-grid areas. So yung mga hindi connected sa major electricity backbone, yun yung covered ng National Power Corporation. The rest of the assets previously owned by the NPC or NAPOCOR are privatized by the Power Sector Assets Liabilities Management Corporation. So si Ms. Cariño mentioned Ambuklao and Binga earlier, na privatize na ang Ambuklao and Binga. They are now owned by Aboit Peace Power. So transmission, we see the Transco and the NGCP. Transco is a government company because the state owns the transmission lines. So owner ang Transco, but we have a concessionaire. The concessionaire manages and earns from the concession agreement, and that is the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines, or NGCP. In the distribution sector, we see electric cooperatives supervised by the National Electrification Administration. So ano bang malapit na electric cooperative sa sa Clark? Maybe Tarelco. Alam ko may Tarelco 1, 2, 3. There we have 121 electric cooperatives, and we have 44, I think, uh, investor-owned utilities like Meralco, Davao Light, Veco, Visayas Electric Company. So those are the distribution utilities. And we have the retail electricity suppliers. So right now, it's not yet down to the household level. So medyo alien siya na concept. Pero mga large consumers tulad mga hotel chains, warehouses, or mga factories, uh, th- they have to transact with the supplier. So may choice sila, may consumer's choice with respect to who will supply electricity. Okay, so next slide. Quite a mouthful. Na? So we have the overall supervisor of the energy sector. And again, energy sector is bigger because it contains the fuels, and the electric power industry is a smaller segment. Okay. The Department of Energy, which has the mandate to prepare, integrate, coordinate, supervise, and control all plans pertaining to energy exploration, development, utilization, distribution, and conservation. Next slide, please. And we have the regulator. So the regulator is an independent and quasi-judicial regulatory body to promote competition, ensure customer choice, encourage market development, prohibit and penalize abuse of market power, and to monitor the market. Okay, next slide, please. So there was a need to reform. There was a need to reform because the corruption was just so much. It was unsustainable. We have assets like the Bataan Nuclear Power Plant, which was mothballed. I will discuss that later. We have the revolution, which toppled the dictatorship, and it was just really a bad time for the world altogether. We have the financial crisis of 1998. So there was a power crisis. Okay. I think Ms. Carino mentioned earlier the high costs of fuel during that time. Next slide, please. at developments sa Chico River projects and congressional records on the matter. So in 2015, during a hearing on climate change on our commitment to deliver nationally determined contributions to the United Nations Climate Change Committee, the DNR emphasized their
Nagulat ako.
efforts for forest management. Same
Wait.
year, August, next slide, please. On river basin management, the DNR made similar manifestations in the Senate. Next slide. So,
Magpakita.
right now, we have a Chico River Pump Irrigation Project. It's a 4.5 billion project under the Build program of the previous administration. The financing is Chinese. So, through the China Export-Import
Oh,
Bank,
goodness. Ayun lang pala siya.
the infrastructure involved construction of pump house, substation. Actually, they're exploring transmission lines, pero as I mentioned earlier, power is a private activity. So, diversion main canal, lateral canals, and other structures. So the purpose is to ensure timely water supply for agriculture. The lead proponent is the National Irrigation Administration. Yeah. Next slide, please. So as of 2023, 99.74% accomplished na yan. So this year, it's likely 100% accomplished na yan. Itong Chico River Pump Irrigation Project. So the irrigation reach is 8,700 hectares of farmland, and they target 4,992 farmer beneficiaries. This is from the NIA report dated December 2023. Next slide, please. With respect to power projects, according to the Department of Energy Renewable Energy Management Bureau, as of October 22, 2024, presently only 14.139 megawatts installed capacity. So the potential capacity for the 6 remaining projects which are not yet online, still in development and pre-development stage, is 324.1 megawatt. So if regular households consume 200 kilowatt hour per month,
1,166,760 households can benefit from the capacity. But if you will compare, no, this is 25% of the plan of the dictatorship. So these are private enterprise driven. So we can see the developers here: Headcore, San Lorenzo Ruiz Corporation, Carayan Hydropower, Kadipo, Bauco, Violago Gold Development Corporation. So private sector driven activities. Next slide, please. So we take note of the Renewable Energy Act, which incentivizes renewable energy projects. So creating systems like the feed-in tariff program, renewable portfolio standards, the renewable energy market, and the green energy option program. Next slide, please. Congress also passed in 2019 the Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop Act, which streamlines the processes of energy sector projects. Next slide, please. So we see predictable and credible pathways with respect to timelines of action, administrative actions.
So with respect to the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, which was created by the IPRA, which we discussed in our detour earlier, the Indigenous Peoples Rights Act, um, the issuance of certificate of no overlap without field-based investigation, approval or denial should be within 3 days. So the law only fixes timelines. The law does not impose the decision of the NCIP. So so the Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop only mandates that a decision must be made within 3 days for the issuance of certificate of no overlap when there is no field-based investigation. If there is already a field-based investigation, then 23 days. The certification precondition for energy development projects, which contains the free, prior, and informed consent, 105 days. Okay, next slide. And I think with that, tapos na yung presentation ko. And I'm ready for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney Balite, for sharing your insights on the Chico River Dam Project's policy implications. And your expertise has shed light on the critical policy considerations that impact both the environment and local communities.
Once again, we extend our deepest gratitude to Attorney Balite for his valuable contributions to this discussion.
So we will now open the floor for our Q&A session, and we encourage everyone to keep the questions brief to allow more participants to engage. You may now virtually raise your hand or type your questions in the chat box.
So, a person, one of the participants sent a question a while ago, and she asked, how does the government address environmental issues such as this in its current energy policies?
Okay, so developing energy projects, very rigorous process yan. So other than the NCIP, there must also be necessary clearances from the DNR. So certifications such as the environmental compliance certificate should be obtained by developers. So complying with regulators is key and critical for these projects.
For the next question, how can young aspiring policymakers learn the policy implications of the Chico River Dam projects to be informed in future energy policies?
Consider professional pathways uh, that will make you sit down in decision making tables. So as Gen Alpha na kayo, no? So as Gen Alpha learners in college with aspiring for careers, kindly consider entering public policy spaces. You can consider professional pathways in the executive branch, working with the National Irrigation Administration, or the DNR, or the Department of Energy, or in the legislative branch with members in offices of members of the House of Representatives, or members of the Senate. The reason I ask this is we know that powerful individuals have an effect in in producing the legal framework that we navigate in. But if we can be participants one way or another in the crafting of the legal framework, then we can be the safeguards to prevent abuses. Something to consider in your professional pathways.
Thank you for your
I think Miss
insights.
Carino is raising her hand.
Yes, Miss Carino is raising her hand. You may now speak
Yes.
po, Miss Carino. Thank you.
I would just like to make some comments, no, on your presentation, attorney.
Yes, ma'am.
First, in relation to Cariño versus Insular, the decision actually came out on February 23, 1909, not
1999.
1906, no? February 23, 1909. The case itself was filed in 1903. That's why it took so many years. But we lobbied Baguio, and therefore February 23, 1909, which is actually the anniversary of the decision of Home when Oliver Wendell Holmes, is now celebrated as Ibaloy Day here
Oh,
in
wow.
Quezon City to recognize the doctrine of native title. No, okay, that's just some on that. But in terms of the discussion on power, um, so as you said, power generation and is already a private activity, no, in the
Correct.
Philippines. And in
Correct.
fact, most of the power generators are really owned by the oligarchs, by
Correct.
the elites in Philippine society, and therefore it's actually a major source of profit. No, in other words, in terms of the costs, etc., etc.
Correct.
Now, I would have been interested in um, is there any information on percentages of usage, like how much is used by residential homes as compared to big business, etc., etc.? Do you
Uh,
have any data on
I can look
usage?
for data on that.
Yeah, kasi as I was stating earlier, power for whom or energy for whom, no, is I think a basic question when we speak about the need really for how much energy is needed. Power for whom, and then of course for most of us, the majority of us, we really need we do not need very much. We just need it for our residences, etc. Pero so who benefits the most, no, uh, from the power industry? Of course, that's quite clear also because precisely from my point of view, from the movement point of view, we question the development framework, which basically allows great profits for private developers at the expense naman of higher energy costs for the majority of the people. And then in terms of, so that was a good table you showed, the ongoing energy projects in the Cordillera or along the Chico River, specifically for those in Kalinga, the Carayan development project, and then also the one of Utka, the Upper Tabuk project. There is actually resistance from the people to these projects, and therefore, actually, they are long-standing projects but have been delayed because nga, the people have not really given their consent yet for these projects, particularly the ones in Kalinga along the in Tabuk, along that river.
Okay, ma'am. So, ma'am, I'm looking at a DOE graph, no, but hindi ko ma-open sa phone ko right now yung ano. But according to the DOE, 28% are residential, 27% are industrial, and 24% commercial. The
Mhm.
rest other uses na. So I think equal yung proportion ng residential, commercial, and
Industry.
industrial users.
Okay.
Ayun. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
your And thank you for your question, Ms. Carino, and thank you for your insights, Attorney Balite. We'll be entertaining the last question from Ms. Diamse. She asked, how are we faring po when it comes shifting to renewable energy? What factors should be considered po regarding access to natural resources in this transition?
Um, well, if you can see yung diagram that I showed earlier, can you kindly show? Uh, Generation as to type. Okay. Before the logistics team will be able to present you the slide that I showed earlier. Um, RE is growing steadily. Um, Depends on who you're asking. Some will say that it's growing slowly. Some will consider that it's it yeah, uh, that it's growing just fine. Um, when I was in the Senate Energy Committee, we made it a point to emphasize uh, uh, that the National Power Corporation Small Power Utility Group will consider hybrid setups for their power generating assets. What are hybrid setups? Hybrid setups are those which utilize solar assets solar and battery assets in conjunction with the diesel assets. Um, I think the NTC SPUG will still have to present its microgrid report. Many are still looking forward to it. Um, uh, the previous administration already faced feed-in tariffs, new feed-in tariffs, largely because of the costs. Because all of us pay for the feed-in tariff allowance. Uh, so, with respect to feed-in tariffs, there are not much incentive to enter uh, uh, so that they can obtain a good feed-in tariff. The DOE is slowly checking and monitoring the implementation of utilities with respect to renewable portfolio standards. This means that utilities are required a certain percentage in the mix to be contracted from renewable energy. So that's good. Similarly, renewable energy certificates for the renewable energy market is being traded in conjunction with the portfolio standards. Kasi, di ba, for example, yung utility, si Clark Electric Company, dapat 10% galing sa renewables. So, pwedeng bumili ng renewable energy certificate si Clark. Uh, kailangan ko punuin yung 10% ko eh. So, itong renewable energy certificate or itong mga kontrata ko galing sa isang solar facility. There are challenges as well because of the variability of renewable energy sources. It's hindi all the time na may araw, hindi all the time na may hangin. There are variability solutions such as batteries, but even with batteries, kailangan mo pa ring kailangan mo pa ring uh, lagyan ng capacity yung battery before it will be released. The Philippines has dominant geothermal playing field. Uh, we were previously ranked number 2 worldwide. I think rank 3 na tayo sa geothermal. But we're talking about hydroelectric assets, especially considering the Chico River assets. Um, uh, I think yung pinakamagandang analogy that would have happened nung dictatorship was the Agus complex assets in Mindanao. Uh, Kasi yun, 1,700 megawatt yung assets. Ang difference lang kasi, hindi dam. Sa Maria Cristina Falls yung Agus complex in Mindanao. So yun yung yun yung isang malaking hydroelectricity asset that we have. So to summarize the answer, we are faring okay with respect to shifting to renewable energy, and government should provide credible pathways for developers to start with respect to their implementation of their projects.
Thank you once more, Atty Paul Heherson M, Balite, for an enlightening session. We hope the insights you shared today will help inform future discussions and decisions on development projects.
At this time, we would like to express our gratitude to Atty Balite for his time and expertise. It is our pleasure to present him with a certificate of appreciation for his invaluable contributions to our forum today.
Allow me to read the citation on the certificate. This certificate is presented to Atty Paul Heherson M. Balite for sharing his valuable knowledge as a guest speaker for Kalikasan at Komunidad, a forum on the impact of Chico River Dam Project held via Zoom.
Please join us in giving a virtual round of applause to Atty Paul Heherson M. Balite.
We would like to ask the logistics team to guide us in a picture-taking session with Atty Balite.
Okay, hello po. May habol po po sa on. Okay, I'll take the picture now. 1, 2. Okay na po. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you po. As we wrap up today's event, we invite everyone to join us for a group photo to commemorate this meaningful discussion.
We kindly request everyone to turn on their cameras for the photo op. Logistics, please take the lead.
Okay po. Since isang slide lang po yung Kasha, isang slide po yung whole Zoom natin. I'll just take one picture po for it. Kaya habol pa po ba? We're on cam. Okay na po. Sige po. Ready po. Ay. 1, 2. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you po. So once again, we would like to acknowledge our partners that made Kalikasan at Komunidad Forum successful. In collaboration with UPDEPP Cultural Committee, co-presented by International Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation, UP Association of Economic Students, SALINLAHI, CvSU Environmental Science Student Association.
In partnership with UP Geology Major Society, CS Wizards, special thanks to Youth Advocates for Climate Action Philippines, Bantayog ng Mabayani Foundation, and Philippine Association of Geology Students, SAG Student Chapter.
We would also like to acknowledge the presence of May Rodriguez, the Executive Director of the Bantayog ng Mga Bayani Foundation. Again, thank you for joining and partnering with us for Kalikasan at Komunidad, a forum on the impact of Chico River Dam Project.
For the audience and partner organizations, Kindly scan the QR code or click the link on the chat box for the feedback form. Your comments and suggestions will be highly appreciated as we plan for future forums like this.
As we near the conclusion of today's forum, we would like to introduce someone who has been instrumental in supporting and guiding us throughout the planning and execution of this event. His insights and dedication have greatly contributed to making this forum a success, providing us with the direction needed to bring these important issues to the forefront.
Prof. Remy De Leon, our STS1 professor, has inspired us to go beyond textbooks and truly consider the impact of these issues on our communities and environment. His commitment to fostering critical thinking has helped shape the way we approach discussions like the one we had today.
It is our honor to invite Prof. De Leon to share his reflections and officially close today's forum. Please let us give him a warm virtual round of applause.
All right. Thank you for attending Kalikasan at Komunidad, a forum on the impact of the Chico River Dam Project, which in turn is one of the Bangkulálâ Science and Technology Policy Fora at UP Clark, organized by the UPDEPP STS students and of course the UPDEPP Cultural Committee. The group that organized this actually had the opportunity to pick between several Marcos era energy projects, but they chose to specifically focus on the Chico River Dam. And it's no surprise that they did. Coming from the professional field of development communication and also as an advocate for preserving political memory regarding the dictatorship era, I can definitely attest that as a nation, we are haunted by the many impacts of the Chico River Dam project. It's really having an impact on us, continues to shape our discourse today, and in some good ways, although the experience of it was very traumatic for many. And certainly something we wish we didn't have to go through. But it happened and we learned from it, and we hope that we will continue to learn from it so that we don't have to go through the same thing again. It's an important reference point for the question of development, of course. For whom? Development for whom? Power from whom? For whom? Energy for whom? And any discussion of how we want to develop as a nation and the people and as a community of communities. And it's also important in the discussion, of course, of the role science and technology plays in all of that, which is why it's important that this forum has been organized by science, technology, and society students whose semester has been spent examining the relationship between science, technology, and society. And in their current module specifically, the relationship between science and technology and policy and development. I really want to thank very much Ma'am Joanna Cariño for being here. Just as soon as I realized we had an opportunity to talk about Chico River Dam, I said we really have to have Ma'am Joanna Cariño. When I was first doing research on Maclean Dulag, and when I was first doing research on the Chico River Dam struggle, it was your thesis that was my overview and introduction to this entire thing. So it was just a very important learning experience to me. Thank you also, Attorney Balite, for your insights on our current energy situation, which is very complicated. And thank you for having that short summary that was very enlightening. And thank you also for providing the legal backdrop for this all. We had so little time, and I know there's so much more to discuss. And I thank you for the thank you for being so willing to give us a concise overview. I know that wasn't easy. Um, Congratulations to the organizing committee. I know this was quite a challenge, but I also knew that you were going to be up to it. And I'm glad that you succeeded with flying colors. I hope you were able to enjoy and learn from this experience, and I hope that it goes on your resumes and that your future employers see how much work you did and put into this and how insightful it was. There's still so much to discuss, from the role of entities like the World Bank in the pushing of megadam projects, all the way to the economy of renewable energy and the environmental impacts thereof, and the importance of finding more sustainable battery technology so that we won't have to deal with so many environmental impacts. I wonder when that's going to be possible, but we're out of time. So let me thank our viewers today, and I will also ask the B group to also promote future Bangkulálâ forums through their FB page. So if you're already following their FB page, please watch out for that. I think the next one is likely on how we can effectively coexist with campus animals. And also, I think the next one after that may be the group that is discussing the future of storytelling in the Philippine, the storytelling industries like journalism and like publishing in the Philippine context and in light of new technologies. Again, Ma'am Joanna, Attorney Balite, thank you. Congratulations to the team of STS students who organized this, and to all our viewers. Good afternoon, or since it's getting dark, good night. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. De Leon, for those insightful words and for helping us bring this important forum to a meaningful close.
Yes, thank you, Prof. De Leon, for sharing your thoughts and wrapping up today's event with such valuable reflections.
And as we come to the end of our forum, we would also like to thank everyone for being with us today. Your presence and participation made this event a success, and we hope it has been both enlightening and inspiring.
Let's carry forward the insights and stories shared today as we continue advocating for the welfare of our communities and the preservation of our environment.
Once again, thank you to our speakers, Ms. Joanna Kintanar Cariño and Atty Paul Heherson M. Balite, and to everyone who made this event possible.
This concludes our forum, Kalikasan at Komunidad, a forum on the impact of Chico River Dam Project.
Thank you, everyone, and have a safe and meaningful day ahead.
Thank you.